I'm very grateful to Kurt for his invitation to kick off these months of guests you'll be receiving during this time of away. Kurt and Rayner, Al Hole and Carol Baker traveled with me to Palestine and Israel in 2017, and our friend Joy Stifler traveled with me as well. I was really delighted to hear that you had our friend Carrie Newcomer here with you last night. Carrie and her husband Robert traveled with me a few years ago as well to Palestine and Israel. We've shared programs with Katie Gray Brown at Manchester University, and I received last night just the kindest note from our mutual friend, our buddy David Wass, welcoming me back. This is my third time speaking here. I'm off script here, but what a gift to the world David Wass has been and continues to be. Kurt's assignment for us while he's gone, to go deep into the question asked of Jesus, who is my neighbor? In an increasingly polarized country and complex world. And he wanted me to focus on the Middle East. So, as you enter West Jerusalem's Yad Vashem International Holocaust Museum, you walk down a long, stark cement hallway, turn into the first exhibit tracing the history of Germany in the 1920s and 30s, which led to the extermination, of 6 million Jews and 6 million others. The first panel in the entire museum is a 1936 quote from exiled German journalist Kurt Tucholsky, warning of the threat of National Socialism. It says, "A country is not only what it does, but what it tolerates." And as you enter Bethlehem, you pass through a 30-foot-high cement wall surrounding the now ghettoized little town, built by Caterpillar machinery paid for with American dollars. On the wall, next to a gun turret and a skunk water cannon Israeli soldiers used to rain down chemically treated water on Palestinian children in the playground below, on that cement wall 30 feet high, there's a 5-foot-high piece of graffiti painted on the wall with black paint. It says, with every bit sense of irony, "A country is not only what it does, but what it tolerates." So today I want to share with you 3 stories exploring the question, what won't we tolerate anymore? In our country, in Palestine and Israel too. And to do that in the context of Kurt's sabbatical question, who is my neighbor? Story number 1, Washington, D.C. I was in the nation's capital a couple of months ago for a conference. On our free days, we walked among the museums, monuments, and memorials, the Smithsonian's, World War II, Washington, Vietnam, Korea, Martin Luther King Jr. And as we walked from the Lincoln Memorial to the Martin Luther King Memorial, we paused and took a little detour and walked through the Korean War Memorial. And as we were leaving, we heard a veteran tell a group of students, "Freedom isn't free." Okay, I get it. But he meant something different, I think, than what we mean. Because since at least, you know your history, your brethren, you get it. Since at least the Goshen Conference in 1918, the Brethren have reaffirmed a number of times, including your 1970 annual conference, passed overwhelmingly with 88% of the vote. The Brethren's statement on war, it's unambiguous. All war is sin. If there's a Brethren creed, that's it. We declare again that our members should not participate in war, learn the art of war, or support war. War or any participation in war is wrong and incompatible with the spirit, example, and teachings of Jesus Christ. Your church's position is a prophetic challenge and a courageous witness to all the rest of us who say we follow the teachings of Jesus. One of the days we spent in the National Museum of the American Indian. We viewed each tribe's intricate, multi-tiered map of the universe, their rituals and dances, and their origin stories with eagles and ravens, bears, buffalo, corn and maize and wheat. The sacred in all things. But I was saddened, too, by other maps showing where these tribes had been dispossessed of their ancestral lands at our government's hands, broken treaties, and the Trail of Tears. And on Ash Wednesday, our little group, we were first in line at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. There's a permanent exhibit there, making a way out of no way, how African Americans survived and thrived and strengthened their communities in the midst of racial oppression. But there was also this poem by Langston Hughes, Beaumont to Detroit, 1943, and it said, "You tell me that Hitler is a mighty bad man. Guess he took lessons from the Ku Klux Klan. 'Cause everything that Hitler and Mussolini do, Negroes get the same treatment from you. I ask you this question because I want to know how long I got to fight both Hitler and Jim Crow." Just change the names, and this could have been written yesterday. For the sake of all that's good in humanity, I want to ask you today, what won't we tolerate anymore? Story number 2. Back to Palestine and Israel. And 2 of my dear friends. Bassem Aramin is a 46-year-old Palestinian Muslim, and Rami Elhanan is a 67-year-old Israeli Jew. Yet they call themselves dear brothers bound together by violence. In September 1977, Rami and his wife's daughter, 14-year-old Smadar, was killed by a Palestinian suicide bomber. And in January 2007, Bassem and his wife's 10-year-old daughter, Abir, was shot in the back and killed by an Israeli soldier. These men are part of the bereaved parents circle. Jews, Christians, Muslims, Israelis, Palestinians who have lost children to violence. Their goal? To not add any new members. Bassem is a devout Muslim who understands his speaking as the will of God. Rami, a non-religious Jew, says that speaking to groups is the only way he can get out of bed in the morning. Such is their pain. They say, "We've swum in a sea of blood and an ocean of emotion. We need to share the land. We're tired of sharing graveyards. They say things that are difficult to hear. Rami is an Israeli military veteran whose father-in-law was a prominent general. Yet he and his wife blame Israel for their daughter's death. He says, "What have we Jews done to cause the kind of despair that would cause a young Palestinian man to blow himself up in the middle of a market?" At least, he continues, at least the killer of our daughter had the decency to kill himself. The killer of Bassem's daughter spent the night at a club. Bassem was imprisoned for 7 years for planning an attack on Israeli soldiers. He says, "My daughter was killed under Israeli policies approved by the United States, shot by an AR-15 made by Bravo Company, Heartland, Wisconsin, with a bullet supplied by the U.S. Army by a soldier wearing a uniform made in America." Global militarization funded by the United States. A country is not only what it does, but what it tolerates. Rami and Bassem often ask their mostly young audiences about the 450-mile-long, 30-foot-high cement wall Israel's built around the West Bank. Who is really occupied, they ask. Who does the wall really enclose? There are many kinds of walls, and it's difficult to see beyond them. Our prejudices and fears and blind spots are walls too. That's why they say, we continue to bang our heads against these high and hard walls so we can try to create cracks of hope. Again, I ask you, in the name of God, what won't we tolerate anymore? Story number 3. One of our dearest friends in the Holy Land is 3-time Nobel Peace Prize nominee, retired Archbishop of the Galilee, Abuna Father Elias Shakur. We've hosted him in Fort Wayne 4 times over the last 15 years. In his book, Blood Brothers, he tells how all the Christian families of his little hometown village in the Galilee were exiled in 1948 and how the Israeli military destroyed all their homes, leveled the village. He studied hard, became a priest, and then began a kindergarten in a village outside Nazareth. The kindergarten grew into a grade school, then a high school. Now, today, with over 2,000 students, Christians, Muslims, Druze, and Jews, kindergarten to 12th grade, learning what it means to be fellow citizens together. Abuna says it's a moral obligation to not only focus on our own tribes, our families, our nation, even the tribe of our religion, but instead to be caretakers of the earth, caretakers of each other. He calls it, I love this, the human race as a beautiful mosaic of complementarity. The human race as a beautiful mosaic of complementarity. And he adds, I have one great problem, and his name is Jesus Christ. It's not difficult to love a friend. You don't need to make peace with a friend. You can only make peace with an enemy. It's not natural to be a peacemaker. We don't want to love those who hate us. It's not natural to love someone who's different. Jesus is a problem for those of us who choose to follow him because we have to change. Our minds have to change. Our hearts have to change and do what is impossible for us to do on our own. There are no easy answers. There are no cookie-cutter solutions, and it's messy. But we can choose to love in spite of fear. The question is, how can we do the hard thing? How can we do what is not natural for us to do? How do we do what we don't want to do but know we should do and we know we must do? I have one great problem, Jesus Christ, Abuna says. And he continues, and I have one great power, Jesus Christ. Kurt's told me that you've already begun this process here. You're an open and affirming church, and I listen to your prayers. You're partnering with a Baptist church in El Salvador. You've taken into membership a person on death row in Oklahoma. You've sponsored a Guatemalan family seeking asylum, and more. Yet Kurt also said that you're intentionally pushing yourself outside your comfort zones and asking the question, who are our neighbors in our local community we've ignored or avoided? Neighbors across culture and language and social class. He's told me that too. Who is our neighbor is the exact question not only that you're asking, but we in our country ought to be asking of ourselves. You know, in hindsight, we see what can happen incrementally, step by step, when fear and intolerance and divisiveness slowly seep into our national discourse. Martin Luther King said that the privileged and powerful never voluntarily give up their power, not without strong resistance. May it be so that this congregation becomes the epicenter of such strong resistance. So on this Mother's Day, first celebrated, as a day of peace, and to address public health issues, on this Mother's Day, it's important to ask, when will we stop tolerating our government's bloated military budget with political leaders falling all over each other to increase it, a kind of macho American Christianity, a macho American Christian militarism? When? When will we stop tolerating $3.8 billion annually to Israel to support their apartheid militarist regime? When? When will we stop tolerating so-called news sources that stoke fear and that ply lies, calling it truth, playing to our worst angels? When? When will we stop tolerating hate speech from our political and religious leaders and on our airwaves? When will we stop tolerating that? When will we stop tolerating racially gerrymandered congressional districts that not only violate the rights of Black Americans and other people of color, but also violate the spirit of the Constitution? When? When will we stop tolerating those who want to sanitize our nation's difficult history about race and sex, keeping us from an honest reckoning with the past so that we can begin to create Martin Luther King Jr.'s beloved community? When? When will we stop tolerating activist courts and male politicians intruding into the sanctity of a woman's conscience, interfering in decisions about her own health? When? And when will we stop tolerating the religious right's attempts to erase the wall of separation between church and state to establish a de facto American Christian theocracy? When? Love your enemies, Jesus says. Blessed are the peacemakers. We can choose to love those who look different, live different, love different. We can choose to live in peace. We can choose to love in spite of fear. The world will tell us it's crazy to live this way. Crazy. And they're right. But if we do it right, we're the real radicals. Jesus, our problem. Jesus, our power. And that's the way that strangers can become neighbors, can become friends. So for the love of Jesus, my friends, for the love of Jesus, what won't you tolerate anymore?